I stood before the Merchant Council of Thornwood, a crystalline bottle of amber syrup in one hand and a crown of polished antlers in the other. The same nobles who had watched my family starve now knelt, begging for contracts. Funny how that works. 3 years ago, or 30 years from now, depending on how you count, I watched my mother die in a workhouse because I was too proud to sell firewood. My father followed a month later, broken not by illness, but by my failure. My sister vanished into the slums of the capital, and I drank myself into an early grave at 26. Then I woke up at 15 again, standing in the Evergrove forest with frost on my boots and a second chance burning in my chest. This time, the deer and the maple trees wouldn't just be wilderness. They'd be weapons. But that moment of triumph came later. Let me tell you how it started. The ceiling had a crack shaped like a broken sword. I knew that crack. I'd stared at it through countless hung-over mornings in my youth, through sleepless nights of regret in my middle age, and finally through the fever haze of dying at 45 in a debtor's prison, while creditors auctioned my mother's loom, the last thing she'd touched before starvation. This story is powered by Butterfly Stories on Patreon, where we continue the stories you love. Want more? Link in the description. And took her. I sat up so fast my vision spotted black. This was the Ashvale cottage. The same warped floorboards, the same drafty windows stuffed with rags, the same smell of cabbage, soup, and desperation. My hands were smooth, young. The calluses I'd earned from 30 years of failed labor gone. My father sat at the table, a clay jug of cheap wine clutched in his fist. Brennan Ashvale, the man who'd once guarded merchant caravans with a straight spine and a sharp blade. Now he hunched like a question mark, brown eyes staring at nothing. I heard coughing from the back room. Vet. Rattling. I moved before I could think, crossing the cottage in 3 strides and pushing aside the curtain. My mother Mirela sat on the edge of her bed, pressing a rag to her lips. When she saw me, she hid it behind her back. Too slow. I'd already seen the red. Dorian, she forced a smile. Silver-streaked auburn hair framed a face too thin, too tired. You're up early. In my first life, I hadn't noticed the blood until it was too late. I'd been too busy sleeping until noon, dreaming of easy schemes and quick fortunes. By the time I realized she was dying, she had 6 months left. By the time I tried to help, she had none. I'm going to the Evergrove at dawn, I said. The words came out harder than I intended. 30 years of regret will do that. She blinked. The forest? Dorian, that's dangerous. Lawless. Full of nothing but scrub timber and exile camps. I'd heard the arguments before. I made them myself once. I know. Then why? Because I'm done waiting for something to change. I turned and walked back through the curtain. My father hadn't moved, hadn't even looked up. I stopped beside him. Father, I need your old hunting knife. He laughed. It was an ugly sound, more cough than humor. Planning to cut down the Evergrove single-handed? Something like that. He waved vaguely toward a chest in the corner. Take it. Take whatever you want. Not like any of it matters. The knife was buried under moth-eaten blankets and a sword wrapped in oiled cloth, his guard blade, untouched for years. I took only the knife. The sword could wait. I left before either of them could argue. The streets of Thornwood were empty in the pre-dawn gray, just rats and the occasional drunk stumbling home. I moved fast, taking back alleys I remembered from decades of living here, avoiding the main square where the Merchant Council's enforcers liked to shake down early risers. The town ended abruptly at a stone marker carved with the guild seal. Beyond it, the Evergrove waited, a wall of black pines and tangled underbrush that had swallowed better men than me. In my first life, I tried poaching here exactly once. Found nothing but thorns and humiliation. Gave up. After 2 days, I stepped past the marker. The forest felt different now. Or maybe I was different. Every shadow held potential instead of threat. Every rustle of wind through branches whispered of opportunity. Then something strange happened. A warmth bloomed in my chest, just behind my sternum. Not painful, more like a muscle stretching. After long sleep, my vision sharpened. Colors seemed brighter, edges crisper. And I could feel something. A presence, distant, but distinct. Alive. Moving through the trees, perhaps half a mile north. I pressed my hand to my chest, confused. In 30 years of my previous life, I'd never experienced anything like this. Magic was for nobles and wealthy merchants who could afford cultivation manuals and private instructors. Commoners like me didn't get supernatural gifts. But here it was, undeniable. A pull, almost like hunger, drawing me toward that distant presence. I followed it. The underbrush parted easier than it should have. Branches that would have snagged my coat seemed to bend away. Within 20 minutes, I found them. Tracks in the soft earth. Cloven hooves, larger than any deer I'd seen. And the edges of the prints shimmered faintly, like morning frost that refused to melt. Noble deer, the species every hunter in the kingdom believed extinct. But I knew better. I'd spent my dying years researching every failed opportunity, every fortune I'd missed. The noble deer still lived, deep in the evergrove where no one bothered to look. Their antlers contained crystallized mana worth more than a merchant's yearly income. Golden light flickered at the edge of my vision. Words formed, burning themselves into my awareness. Hunting system initialized, beast here unlocked. Target detected. Noble deer, juvenile male, distance 847 meters north-northwest. Vitality, strong, current state, grazing. I could see it. Not with my eyes, with something deeper. A golden silhouette moving through the trees. Every step mapped in my mind, every breath tracked. This was real, all of it. The second chance, the deer, the impossible system awakening in my chest. I took one step forward. Metal snapped around my ankle. Pain lanced up my leg. As a hunting snare bit into my boot, the teeth punching through leather, but stopping just short of flesh. I've been so focused on the deer, on the system, on my grand plans, that I'd walked straight into a trap like an amateur. A figure dropped from the branches above. Black hair cut short, amber eyes sharp. As flint, a hunting bow already drawn and aimed at my throat. "You're on my territory," Sarenvale said, and her voice promised violence. "Start talking, or I start shooting." The knife pressed cold against my throat before my brain caught up with my body. I said talk. Saren's amber eyes held no bluff. She'd killed before. I could see it in the steadiness of her hand. Golden maple. The words came out hoarse. 3 groves. Deepest one sits by the split boulder where the creek forks north. Her blade trembled. Just a fraction. But I felt it. "How do you know that?" She yanked me closer. "Nobody knows that. Nobody. I know how to process it too." I kept my voice flat, fighting the panic clawing at my chest. "Slow boil method. Copper vessels, not iron. Iron kills the potency. 3 days of reduction. Then clay storage away from sunlight." The knife drew a thin line of blood. I didn't flinch. "You're lying." But her voice had changed. Uncertainty crept in. "Some merchant spy. Blackthorn sent you. Blackthorn doesn't know the syrup exists. If he did, you'd already be dead and the forest would be crawling with his harvesters." I met her stare. "I'm not your enemy. I'm your opportunity." For 3 heartbeats, I thought she'd slit my throat anyway. Then she stepped back. The knife stayed ready, but she wasn't pressing it to my skin anymore. "Talk fast. Partnership. You harvest, I process and sell. 50-50 split on everything. I work alone. And you've been sitting on a fortune for how long? Years? Because you can't move product without the Merchant Council's approval, and you can't get approval without revealing your source." I rubbed my throat. My fingers came away red. "I know the noble markets. I know what they'll pay. I know how to bypass the council entirely." Something flickered in her eyes. Interest, maybe, or calculation. Then it died. "No." She grabbed my collar and shoved me forward. "Walk. You're leaving my forest, and if I see you again, I won't bother with questions." She marched me for an hour. Every time I tried to speak, she pressed the knife harder against my spine. When we reached the tree line, she kicked me forward and vanished into the shadows without a word. I limped home with blood on my neck and failure in my chest. The cottage door hung open. Wrong. Mother always locked it. After dark. Always. I ran. 2 men in merchant's gray stood in our main room, one holding a ledger, the other examining our cooking pots with casual contempt. Corv and Blackthorn's seal gleamed on their badges. Mother sat at the table, tears streaming silently down her face. Father stood behind her, staring at nothing, his hands hanging limp at his sides. Ah, the prodigal son. The ledger holder smiled without warmth. Dorian Ashvale, yes? Your family owes the Merchant Council 40 silver marks. Payment from a loan your father took 3 winters past. I remember that loan. In my first life, it had been the first domino, the one that started our collapse. We have 30 days. The enforcer's voice dripped false sympathy. After that, we seize the cottage and everything in it. Standard terms. He snapped the ledger shut. The council looks forward to your timely payment. They left without closing the door. Mother's sobs broke the silence. Father reached for the bottle on the shelf. I grabbed his wrist before he could. Not tonight. My voice came out harder than I intended. We're not drinking our way through this. Not again. He looked at me. Really looked. I saw confusion in his hollow eyes. And something else. A spark of the man he used to be. What would you have us do, boy? His voice cracked. 40 marks. We don't have 4. I have a plan. I didn't sleep that night, while my parents lay in exhausted silence. I pulled Father's old hunting journal from the chest beneath his bed and sketched by candlelight. Maps from my memories. Locations I'd learned too late in my first life. After the deer were gone and the maples had been stripped by competitors, there was another stand. Smaller, harder to reach, but real. A place Saren might not know about. A grove I'd only discovered in my final years, when desperation drove me deeper into the forest than any sane man would go. I waited until the moon set, then slipped out through the back window. The Evergrove swallowed me whole. My system pulsed with each step. Prey trails glowed faint silver in my awareness. Rabbit warrens, deer paths, a fox den beneath a fallen oak. Plant markers flickered at the edge of my perception. Medicinal herbs, edible roots, and finally, resource detected, golden maple, harvestable. The tree stood alone in a moonlit clearing, its bark pale as bone, its leaves shimmering with faint gold even in darkness. Smaller than the one Saren guarded, but real. I worked fast. My past life's hands remembered the motions, the precise angle of the tap, the careful depth of the cut. Syrup began to flow, thick and amber, sweeter than honey. First hunt completed, plant harvest, plus 5 system points. The notification burned through my awareness like fire. I could feel the power settling into my meridians, strengthening pathways I'd only dreamed of opening in my first life. Then torchlight flickered through the trees. Ispoon. 3 figures emerged from the darkness. Saren in front, bow drawn, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. Told you I'd kill you, she said. Should have listened. The arrow wasn't aimed at me. Saren's bow pointed at the taller man flanking her, a scarred brute with a hunting knife already drawn. The second man lunged for her quiver. Followed you for 3 months, the scarred one growled. Knew you'd find the gold eventually. They weren't her allies. They were vultures. Saren loosed her arrow. It punched through the lunging man's shoulder, spinning him into a birch trunk. But the scarred one was already moving, knife sweeping toward her exposed neck. Target marked. Hostile. Vitals detected. Strike point. Left kidney exposed. The knowledge flooded me like ice water. I didn't think. I tackled him mid-swing, driving my shoulder into his ribs. We hit the frozen ground hard. His knife carved fire across my left forearm, shallow, but bleeding fast. I slammed my forehead into his nose. Cartilage crunched. Run, Saren shouted. The wounded man was scrambling away through the trees, clutching his shoulder, crashing through undergrowth toward Thornwood. The scarred one beneath me went limp, unconscious or dead. I didn't care which. I rolled off him, clutching my bleeding arm. The third poacher had already vanished into the darkness. He knows, I gasped. He'll tell everyone. Saren's face was pale, but her hands were steady. As she retrieved her arrow from the groaning man by the tree, she kicked him in the temple. He stopped groaning. I had it handled, she said. You had an arrow in his shoulder, while a knife was at your throat. I pressed my sleeve against my wound. The bleeding was slowing already, faster than it should. The system hummed in my veins, knitting flesh back together. You're welcome. She stared at me, at the blood, at the unconscious men, at my hands, which weren't shaking the way they should be. After killing someone. Who are you? She whispered. Really? Someone who just saved your life. I stood, testing my arm. The pain was fading to a dull ache. Now will you listen to my proposal? The grove felt smaller now, violated by violence. Golden sap still dripped from my tap, wasted drops falling into the snow. Saren was quiet for a long moment. Then she sheathed her knife. Talk. 50-50 split on all syrup harvested from groves we find together. You handle tracking and forest work. I handle processing, transport, and sales. I met her amber eyes. Anyone who threatens our operation, we deal with. Together. And the poacher who escaped. A problem for tomorrow. Tonight, we have maybe 4 hours until dawn. I gestured at the pale tree, still bleeding gold. How much can we harvest? She smiled for the first time, a predator smile. More than you can carry. We worked through the night. I showed her techniques I'd learned serving Master Aldwin in my past life. How to reduce raw sap over low heat until it concentrated in a syrup worth 10 times its weight. How to seal jars with beeswax and pine resin to preserve freshness for months. Secrets that alchemists guarded jealously, sold only to guild members for prices that would bankrupt a village. Where did you learn this? Saren demanded, watching the sap thicken in her copper pot. From a man who didn't know I was watching. 2 sentences of truth. Enough. Keep stirring. By dawn, 6 ceramic jars sat cooling on a flat stone. Each one held enough concentrated golden maple to enhance a dozen alchemical preparations. In the capital, nobles paid 40 gold crowns per jar for inferior product. First hunt completed combined harvest, plus 15 system points. Martial cultivation, body tempering stage 1 unlocked. Physical enhancement active, plus 20% strength, plus 15% healing. The power settling into my muscles felt like warm honey spreading through cold limbs. Wealthy families paid thousands of gold crowns for cultivation manuals, hired master instructors, purchased medicinal baths and rare herbs. I was gaining the same benefits by hunting and harvesting by surviving. We need to hide these until we find a buyer, Saren said. The council controls all. No. She looked up sharply. I'm taking 1 jar into Thornwood today. I have a buyer in mind. The council will seize it, tax it, or just take it and claim you stole it from licensed harvesters. They'll try. I wrapped 1 jar carefully in cloth, tucking it into my pack. Hide the rest. I'll find you tomorrow. Dorian. She caught my arm, the wounded one. I didn't wince. If you cross Blackthorn, he'll destroy you. He destroyed my family once already. In my past life, his taxes had bled us dry. His enforcers had broken my father's hands when we couldn't pay. This time I'm ready. I left her in the grove with 5 jars of liquid gold and a new partnership sealed in blood. The walk home took 2 hours. I was planning my approach to the council, calculating prices and leverage when I pushed open our crooked door. Mother lay crumpled on the floor. Mirela. Father was kneeling beside her, hands shaking. His eyes were red, hollow. She collapsed this morning. Fever. The healer says it's lung sickness. I dropped to my knees beside her. Her skin burned. Her breathing rattled like stones in a tin cup. Medicine, I said. What does she need? Silverleaf tonic. 15 marks. Father's voice cracked. We don't have 5. 15 silver marks. My jar was worth 40 gold crowns to the right buyer. But in Thornwood, the only buyers were council members. And council access required a trade license. Corvin Blackthorn controlled all trade licenses. I looked at my mother's pale face and my father's broken eyes, at the jar in my pack that could save her or doom us all. 1 hour later, I walked through the iron doors of the Thornwood Merchant Council headquarters. The guard didn't stop me. I was too poorly dressed to be a threat. Corvin Blackthorn sat behind a mahogany desk, rings glittering. As he signed documents, he looked up when I entered. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Ashvale's boy, come to beg. I set the jar of golden maple syrup on his desk. The amber liquid caught the light like captured sunlight. His smile froze. Exclusive supply rights, I said. All future product, through your council, at rates we negotiate together. But you pay in advance. I leaned forward. Today, 15 silver marks. Now, Blackthorn's fingers trembled. As he reached for the jar, Blackthorn's tongue touched the syrup. His whole body went still. The false warmth drained from his face. What replaced it was naked greed, the expression of a man who just discovered gold in his garden soil. I'd seen that look before, in my previous life, on the faces of men who destroyed my family to take what we had. Where did you find this? His voice dropped to a whisper. This enhances alchemical potency. The apothecaries would kill for a steady supply. A grove 3 days east. The lie came easy, past the broken ridge, in a valley most hunters avoid. He was already calculating. I watched his rings catch the light. As his fingers drummed the desk, 20 marks appeared on the mahogany surface. I'd asked for 15. For your cooperation, he said, and your discretion about our arrangement. I took the coins and left before his greed could curdle into suspicion. The run home took everything I had. My legs burned from cultivation training I'd been doing in secret, muscles pushed past normal limits using techniques I'd watched noble sons practice in my previous life. They'd laughed when they caught me observing. Now their knowledge served a commoner's desperate sprint. Mother's fever broke at dawn. She opened her eyes. As morning light touched the window, color had returned to her cheeks. The medicine, purchased with Blackthorn silver, had done what prayer and hope could not. Dorian, her voice was weak, but clear. You look exhausted. I'm Fina. I wasn't. But watching her breathe without that terrible rattle made exhaustion meaningless. Father stood in the doorway. He said nothing, but his eyes followed me. As I counted our remaining coins, 5 silver marks. Enough for what came next. The livestock market in Thornwood's lower district sold supplies for animals no one in the Evergrove actually kept. I purchased salt blocks, hemp rope, wooden stakes, and a bronze bell that would carry sound without startling prey. The merchant gave me strange looks, but took my money. I'd watched nomadic herders in my previous life manage wild aurochs. They'd used patience, consistency, and careful rewards. Noble deer were smarter than cattle, but the principles remained sound. Saren found me 3 miles into the forest, laying the first salt lick. You're building a trap. Her amber eyes missed nothing. A big one. I'm building a farm. She laughed, then stopped when she saw my face. You can't domesticate noble deer. Hunters have tried for centuries. Hunters try to catch them. I drove the stake deeper into the soft earth. I'm going to make them come to me. Something shifted in my skull. The hunter's mark pulsed with new information. Beast domestication protocol unlocked track. Sense, bond prey behavior analysis, enhanced herd dynamics comprehension, initiated the forest changed. I could feel the deer's presence now, not just their direction, but their mood, wariness, curiosity. The young buck from before, watching from a ridge 200 yards away. You felt something. Saren's voice was sharp. Just now. What was it? I'll tell you when I trust you. We worked until sunset, then past it. The feeding stations took shape. 10 sites spread across the grove, each position based on deer trails I could now sense like threads in a tapestry. My body screamed, but the pain was different now. Productive. Each swing of the hammer drove iron body cultivation deeper into my muscles. I'd spent gold crowns in my previous life trying to afford a single month at the Thornwood Combat Academy. They'd rejected my application anyway. Commoners weren't welcome. Now I was achieving what their students struggled toward, and it cost me nothing but sweat. 3 days passed. The deer began approaching the salt licks. First the young ones, bold and hungry. Then the does. Finally the bucks, cautious, proud, magnificent. Their antlers caught moonlight like crystal formations. I didn't hunt them. Set. I waited. I let them grow accustomed to my scent, my breathing, my existence at the edge of their world. The hunter's mark fed me their emotional states. Fear fading. Acceptance growing. Father appeared on the 4th morning. He looked different. He'd shaved. His clothes were clean. He stood straighter than I'd seen him stand in years. What can I do? for words. In my previous life, he'd never asked them. He'd drunk himself into oblivion, while the family crumbled around him. But something in my work had reached him, perhaps the sight of his 15-year-old son achieving what grown men couldn't. Security. I handed him charcoal and parchment. Map the trails we've been using. Note where ambush points exist. Track anything unusual, human tracks especially. His old knowledge surfaced like a body. If this story has you hooked, Butterfly Stories on Patreon is where the next parts, exclusive continuations, and early releases are waiting. You can start with a free trial right now through the link below. All right, back to the story. Rising from deep water. Caravan routes. Choke points. The mathematics of protecting a valuable cargo. He'd been a guard before he was a failure. Blackthorn will send people, he said. Yes. Soon. Yes. He began mapping immediately. A week later, Blackthorn scouts returned from the Broken Ridge. I knew because my contact in the lower market mentioned their confused reports. No grove existed where I'd claimed. The guildmaster's suspicion would be growing. I needed to stay ahead of it. My syrup deliveries continued. Each yard disappeared into noble estates within hours. The taste spread through Thornwood's upper class like wildfire. Then House Varantis sent a messenger. The man wore silk and waited outside our hovel with visible discomfort. His letter bore a crimson seal I recognized. The family that controlled all taxation in Thornwood. Lord Aldred Varantis requests a private audience. His tone suggested this wasn't a request. Tomorrow, noon, his estate. I accepted. The meeting room smelled of incense and old money. Aldred Varantis was younger than I expected. 30, perhaps, with sharp features and sharper eyes. Your syrup has caused quite the stir, Master Ashvale. He gestured to a chair. The Merchant Council is displeased. Corvin Blackthorn specifically. Blackthorn takes his cut. For now, Varantis smiled. I offer something better. A noble trade license. You answer to House Varantis alone. The Merchant Council cannot touch you. My heart pounded. This bypassed everything. Complete protection from Blackthorn's interference. The price. Your complete loyalty. Your exclusive supply. And your eternal gratitude. I understood the implications. I'd be trading one master for another. But a noble master could shield me from. A servant entered and whispered something to Varantis. His smile widened. Interesting. My informants report that Corvin Blackthorn just received word of this meeting. His eyes found mine. It seems you have a decision to make, young Ashvale, and not much time to make it. I decline your leash, Lord Varantis. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lord Varantis's smile didn't waver, but something cold moved behind his eyes. Bold and foolish. I offer something better. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite my hammering heart. Exclusive first purchase rights on all prestige goods I produce. Golden syrup, noble deer products, everything rare. House Varantis sees it before anyone else. And in return, noble protection against guild interference. Not ownership, partnership. Varantis studied me for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine sound that echoed off the marble walls. You negotiate like a man 3 times your age. Do we have terms? We have an understanding. He raised his glass. Welcome to the game, young Ashvale. The understanding lasted exactly 2 days. I returned home to find Corvin Blackthorn's seal nailed to our door. The document beneath it declared our trade license void. All goods subject to immediate seizure. The Ashvale family had 24 hours to vacate the premises. Mother stood in the doorway, her face pale, but her jaw set. They came. While you were away. 6 men. They said they'd return tomorrow with more. Father sat at the kitchen table, staring at the worn surface where we'd shared 1,000 meals. His hands were flat against the wood, trembling slightly. I'd seen this before. In my first life, this was the moment he broke completely. Not this time. Father. I kept my voice calm. Where's your sword? His head came up slowly. What? Your sword. From your guard days. Where is it? He swallowed. The cellar. Behind the preserving jars. Why would you get it? Something sparked in his hollowed eyes. Not hope. Not yet, but something older. Something he'd buried for 15 years. He rose and walked toward the cellar stairs. By nightfall, our cottage had transformed. 12 families crowded our small yard. The Winters, who Blackthorne had bankrupted over lumber tariffs. The Greystone brothers, whose smithy he'd seized for unpaid fees. Old matron Selwick, who'd lost her bakery to his price manipulation. I'd spent weeks building these relationships. A warning here, a small loan there. Information about Blackthorne's next target, whispered in the right ear. Every seed I planted was blooming tonight. We stand together, announced Torvald Winter, his massive arms crossed. They take the Ashvales, they take all of us. My father emerged from the cottage, and the yard fell silent. He wore his old guard leathers, weathered, but intact. In his hands, a blade that hadn't seen light in 15 years. His grip was uncertain, but it was a grip. Brennan Ashvale stands at his own door, he said quietly. Let them come. Mother pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. I felt the hunting system pulse with warmth. Not a notification. Something deeper. Recognition. They came at dawn. 14 enforcers in Blackthorne's colors, led by a scarred man I recognized from my first life. Garrett Hollow, a Silver Meridian cultivator who'd broken father's legs when we couldn't pay. In this timeline, I'd ensure that never happened. Stand aside, old man. Garrett's voice dripped contempt. We're here for the goods and the building. Don't make this ugly. This is my home. Father's voice shook, but he didn't move. It was your home. Now it belongs to... I stepped past my father into the morning light. Garrett Hollow stopped mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed, assessing, and then widened, as he sensed something wrong. Boy, what have you? I moved. The cultivation techniques I'd witnessed nobles practicing in my first life, the forms burned into my memory through 30 years of regret. My body had been learning them in secret. Through the hunting system's essence absorption. Through countless hours of hidden practice. Through the trace mana I'd cultivated from every deer, every kill, every successful hunt. My fist connected with his solar plexus before he could raise his guard. Silver Meridian or not, he wasn't prepared for a commoner who moved like a golden core master. Garrett doubled over, gasping. I caught his collar, twisted, and threw him into his own men. 3 went down. Iron body, 4th refinement, I announced clearly, letting the gathered crowd hear. Approaching Silver Meridian threshold. Would anyone else like to test my progress? The remaining enforcers exchanged glances. They'd expected helpless traders, not a cultivator who'd downloaded decades of noble martial knowledge into a desperate teenager's body. This isn't over, one of them spat. No, but for today it is. They retreated. The yard erupted in cheers. But I wasn't finished. Hoofbeats approached from the forest road. The crowd parted as Saren Vale emerged from the tree-line, leading something impossible. A noble deer walked beside her, calm and magnificent, its crystallized antlers catching the morning sun like frozen lightning. Dorian Ashvale, Saren announced, her voice carrying. I deliver proof of your claims. The first domesticated noble deer in 300 years. The crowd fell utterly silent. Apex predator status approaching. The hunting system pulsed. Human quarry protocols unlocked. I pushed the notification aside and approached the deer. Its antlers alone, harvested painlessly through techniques only I remembered, were worth more than Blackthorne's entire warehouse inventory. More hoofbeats. House Varantis soldiers appeared on the main road, their captain dismounting with a smile. Lord Varantis sends his regards. He wished to observe his new trading partner's capabilities. His eyes lingered on the deer, on me, on the enforcers retreating in the distance. He is quite pleased. Corvin Blackthorne arrived within the hour. He'd expected to destroy me. Instead, he found himself standing in a yard crowded with witnesses, facing a teenager who demonstrated noble cultivation, possessed impossible resources, and held noble patronage. His oily smile never wavered. Young Ashvale, it seems there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I met his eyes. You tried to destroy my family. Again, that last word slipped out before I could stop it. Blackthorn's eyes flickered with confusion again, but I pressed forward. Here are your options. 1. Continue this attack and face House Verandis' displeasure. 2. Acknowledge the Ashvale Trading Company as a legitimate enterprise and negotiate. As equals. His jaw tightened. And if I refuse both? The hunting system whispered dark possibilities. I could mark him now, track him, find his weaknesses, end him. I felt Mother's eyes on my back. Then I choose mercy you don't deserve. I extended my hand. Partnership terms, Guildmaster. 20% of prestige goods, revenue routes through council channels. You get rich. I get recognized. Everyone survives. His hand trembled as he took mine. You're not what I expected, boy. I know. That night, we gathered in the warehouse I'd purchased with Verandis' advance payment. The Ashvale Trading Company. Official. Recognized. Protected. Father raised his glass, and the room quieted. His eyes met mine. Clear, present, alive in a way I'd never seen in my first life. To my son, his voice cracked. I'm proud of the man you've become. The words I'd spent 30 years dying to hear. I wept. Not from grief, from redemption. Mother held me. Father's hand gripped my shoulder. The weight of a lifetime's guilt finally began to lift. Behind my tears, the hunting system pulsed. Next tier unlocked, sentient quarry available. I silenced it. I chose my father's embrace over the power burning in my veins. I chose the man I wanted to be. The moment stretched, perfect and whole. Then the warehouse door exploded inward. A woman stood in the wreckage, dressed in the crimson robes of the Royal Inquisition. Her eyes burned with actual fire, golden core at minimum, and her voice carried the weight of imperial authority. Dorian Ashvale. She raised a scroll bearing the king's seal. You are hereby summoned to the capital to answer charges of illegal cultivation, possession of forbidden knowledge, and her burning gaze swept the room. Suspected temporal heresy. She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who hunted monsters. The crown has questions about how a commoner child knows techniques that died with the old kingdom. You will provide answers. Her eyes found mine. Or you will provide a corpse. Want to see what happens next? Continue this story on Butterfly Stories over on Patreon. Start your free trial to unlock the next episodes. Link in the description.